everything was in chaos. It seemed like a desperate time.
No memorial could more eloquently honor President Kennedy's memory than the earliest possible passage of the Civil Rights Bill.
His advisors came to him and said, "You cannot do that. You'll be a failed president." But he showed a moral courage to take a great political risk. All of us who were alive during that period of time in 1963 was an incredibly tumultuous and scary time. The country had experienced the assassination of John F. Kennedy. They had then watched in real time when Oswald, the assassin, was killed by Jack Ruby.
He's been shot. He's been shot.
There was a great sense of uncertainty in the country as a whole.
Around the world, disbelief was the first reaction. Then a great outpouring of grief, shock, and revulsion.
In the last years of Lyndon Johnson's life, I worked with him on his memoir, and he told me then what an extraordinarily difficult situation it was with JFK's assassination.
The empty White House is a symbol of this infamous mockery of American ideals of peace and freedom.
But he understood that there was a feeling in the country of wanting to make something good happen from the death of John F. Kennedy. So he made that decision in that moment of chaos. He was going to make passage of the Civil Rights Bill his #1 priority.
It is time now to write the next chapter, to enact a civil rights law.
But his advisors came to him and said, "You cannot do that. Probably not get it through the House. You'll never get the bill through the Senate and the filibuster. You'll be a failed president. You only have a certain amount of currency as a president to expend, and you cannot spend it on this." And then he famously said, "Then what the hell is the presidency for?" And then he decided he would make a speech to a joint session of Congress 2 days after the funeral, where he would announce that this is my main priority. He started out very humbly, saying, "I would give anything I have
not to be standing here today."
And then he said,
"No memorial oration or eulogy could more eloquently honor President Kennedy's memory than the earliest possible passage of the Civil Rights Bill for which he fought so long."
He had made it his goal he would go for civil rights. Once he told the joint session of Congress he was going to make this his #1 priority, he just set to work. Almost the very next day, he called every single congressman, but he had to promise them things. I mean, he would go to bed at night thinking about which congressman I need to talk to the next day. He would wake up in the morning looking at the books and figuring out who do I need to get. He kept charts on his wall. This is exactly who I need to get at this moment in time. He worked, he worked, he worked, he worked. He'd call them at 6 a.m., he'd call them at noon, he'd call them at midnight. He even called a senator famously at 2 a.m. He said, "I hope I didn't wake you up." And the senator said, "Oh no, I was just lying here looking at the ceiling hoping my president would call." And each time he said, "What do you need for me to get you to come on this bill? Do you need a dam? Do you need a public works project? Whatever it is, we can get it done."
I just want you to know that I considered it a very great personal favor to me. Well, I would be delighted to work with you, sir.
So finally, he gets the bill passed in the House, but then the real problem is going to be the Senate. He was going to face a filibuster, and the head of the Southern delegation for the filibuster would be Richard Russell, his closest friend, his mentor. And he knew perhaps they would feel he had betrayed them because he was a Southerner, but he knew there was no way with the Democratic Party split in two he could ever get 2/3. In order to end the filibuster, he needed the Republicans. And to get the Republicans, he needed the minority leader, Everett Dirksen. But Johnson understood that Dirksen also cared not just about the quid pro quos, but how he would be remembered in history.
I saw your exhibit to World Fair, and it said the land of Lincoln. So you're worthy of the land of Lincoln, and the man from Illinois is going to pass the bill, and I'll see that you get proper attention and credit.
So he says famously to him, "Everett, you come with me on this bill, and you bring a few Republicans along. You bring many Republicans along, and 200 years from now, school children will know only two names, Abraham Lincoln and Everett Dirksen." How could Dirksen resist? He brought 22 Republicans to join the 44 Northern Democrats to break that filibuster, bring that bill to the floor, where it passed and became the law of the land, changing the face of the country.
This Civil Rights Act is a challenge to all of us
to go to work in our communities and our states, in our homes and in our hearts, to eliminate the last vestiges of injustice.
It passed that morning of July 2nd, and they actually wonderful ceremony that night, right in the East Room of the White House. I mean, here you can see that extraordinary moment when one of the first pens he gives, Lyndon Johnson does, is to Martin Luther King, knowing that the civil rights movement was really the foundation for how this bill was able to be passed. Had it not been for the bravery and courage of the civil rights marchers, the freedom riders, the people who sat in at lunch counters, the bill would never have had the momentum that it had. He understood that the civil rights community themselves, they were the major people who had made this happen. They had been out on the streets. They were the ones with the courage. They were the ones with the bravery. And it was time for the country to follow on that. For 78 years, Black people in the South had suffered daily life indignities of not being able to go into a restaurant, not being able to go into a hotel, not being able to go into a sporting event that would be considered for whites only. Now, overnight, legal segregation would be ended, and they could feel free to go wherever they wanted to, into a restaurant, into a hotel, into a bathroom. It changed the daily life and the feeling of respect and dignity that they had longed for a very long time. And the extraordinary thing was there was a fear that there would be violence on that day. It was surprisingly peaceful, the transition that was made. In December of 1972, there was a great symposium at the LBJ Library of the civil rights leaders. All the past leaders and the present leaders and the future leaders were there. He had had a heart attack some weeks before, and he really wasn't in very good shape. But he got to the lectern and he started to speak, and his voice had a great deal of stateliness in it and emotion in it.
Rome wasn't built in a day, and we can't overcome all the injustices or make this a perfect world overnight. But we are on our way, and we are going to do just that before it's over.
He said, I don't want us here to celebrate everything that we've done in my administration.
The progress has been much too small. We haven't done nearly enough. I'm kind of ashamed of myself that I had 6 years and couldn't do more than I did.
What I want to talk about is what there is still left to do. And then he said how much further they had to go, but if we have the will.
And if our hearts are right, and if courage remains our constant companion, then, my fellow Americans, I am confident we shall overcome.
That was his final speech. 6 weeks later, he would die of another heart attack. When I talked to him in those last years, what he dreamed of was somehow that civil rights would be what he'd be remembered for. He knew, of course, that the war in Vietnam had cut his legacy in two, but what he really hoped was that somehow people would remember that he had done a great deal for civil rights.